It's Saturday, the 6th of March, and Mark and I are together now to begin the training videos. Mark, we suggested that each and every video, some might take 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, depends what the subject matter is. But the first one, what we've agreed is first of all, let's explain to people what it is that we're doing different. And then we can run on then to the difference between lawful and legal. So I'm going to go straight over to you, Mark. Let's keep each video punchy, direct to the point. What is it that we're doing that's different?
Right, quite simply, we're all familiar with the terminology innocent until proven guilty. And the burden of proof lies upon the claimant. So they are claiming to have authority to make us comply to their command. So all we're doing is we're actually asking them to prove that they have the right to command and that we under obligation to command. And as soon as you put anything into dispute, so they come with a claimed right to tell you what to do. What we're doing now is totally unheard of. We are asking them to prove their right and our obligation to perform at their command.
And that can be basically whether or not that is the police or enforcement officers approaching you at a peaceful protest. It can be a store that's suggesting that you wear a mask. It can be a school that suggests that children are tested. What we're basically saying is, and this goes back to the request from supermarkets to provide their risk assessment, doesn't it? Which is what we're saying is, you are asking us to comply with your rules, regulations, legislations, not law. And all we're saying to you is, that's okay. Prove to us why we should comply with what you're saying.
Yeah, and so I'll quickly add in there, what's the prerequisites for something to have what's called the force of law. And the prerequisites for something to have the force of law is, firstly, it must be possible. And then secondly, it must be rational. And then thirdly, it must be reasonable. So on the first one, on possibility, they're making a claim that a virus called SARS-CoV-2 exists and that it proves, it causes a disease called COVID-19. So the basic things that we're asking there is quite simply, we've got admissions from the government to say they've got no evidence of this. And therefore, by admission, there is no dispute actually over this. They've admitted they have no evidence and therefore it fails on the impossibility test. There's no evidence, it's impossible, therefore it cannot be lawful, even though it's legislated. So we're asking them to prove, we've got a list of 12 questions, and they need to answer each of those 12 questions. And then the next step is, once they prove it exists, then it needs to be rational. And that is based on the balance of probabilities. So literally taking their claims of the sequence of causation, i.e. a virus exists, it multiplies, it causes a disease, and then it goes out of you and is transmitted to infect somebody else to give them the same disease. So even if you look at just those very basic steps of it, each one has a probability of 50% of being true or false. So even with 6 steps, you're starting at a 50% probability for each one. On the second step, the probability of the 2 being correct is 25%, of 3 being correct, 12.5%, of 4 being correct, 6.25%, of 5 being correct, 3 and a bit. And so basically it's very improbable, and this is where the risk assessment comes in. The risk assessment is broken into 3 parts. basically what is the claim on the balance of probabilities, then what does the science have to say, and what have they admitted. And in all three cases, the probabilities of the story being true is below 1%. Now that scientifically is significant, that the story doesn't hold water.
Well, I've got some bad news for them and some good news for the people serving. The 12 questions that are being put, as you know, through freedom of information requests, we can actually already answer the questions for them. The questions that we're going to put to them, they can't possibly answer this. So they don't stand, they don't have a leg to stand on for anyone to come back and say to you, yes, we have proven cases here. Yes, we have cause for you to seize the continuing of opening your store, or you must wear masks. It's not going to happen. The work has already been done, and therefore everyone can go out with total confidence, knowing that no one can possibly come back with a fair risk assessment, and no one can come back and answer the questions put to make their case stand. So that's exactly what we do. We're saying to them,
and that's the beauty of this.
Yeah,
we innocent, they making the claim that we must follow their orders, and as claimant they must prove it, and we simply asking them to prove their claim.
Yeah. Do you want
to get emotional about the science or anything? We just want 12 simple answers, and they the claimants. Why do we have to fight about it? There's absolutely no reason to fight about it. And then the final thing is, the third thing for something to have the power of the force of law, is it must be proportional. And so again, there we've made a table to ask the question, you know, to save a few elderly. Now this is something that generally gets very emotional. And so to remove the emotions, what I've done is actually favored the elderly over the young, and worked on basically remaining life years based upon projected lifespan, which is heavily favored in the elderly's favor. And it's totally unreasonable that to save a few, that the many pay the price. And so again, to try and remove the emotion out of the argument, you know, anybody that turns around and says, oh, you're telling me an elderly person's life is worth less than a youngster's? No, I'm not. I'm saying I'm even favoring the elderly for what they've done and the knowledge they've left us and what they've done in their lifetime. They heavily favored over the young. And even then, we still, as a society, need to make a decision as to what is fair and reasonable. So those three things is basically the whole, what's different about what we do.
And to conclude that, Mark, basically what we're doing that is different is that we are not acting upon receipt of their claim, because they haven't actually made one, have they? We're actually asking them to make a claim now. We're saying
no. Anytime anybody comes and tells you put a mask on, they're making a claim.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying to you is we're not exactly acting as defendants now. What we're doing is we're turning it back on them and saying, you're making a claim against us, prove your claim. Indeed.
Correct. You
Mark,
prove it. And the other thing is, the problem with bringing a claim against any of them, how do you prove a negative? It's an impossibility. And therefore you get into endless arguments of expert witnesses and stuff like that. You can't prove a negative. So quite simply, we're just asking them, prove it.
Exactly. Well, I look forward to seeing these people try to prove it, which we know they can't.
They can't.
We'll end this video there, and the second video we'll talk about the difference between lawful and legal. So
yeah,
see you shortly.
And we'll introduce equity as well.
Absolutely. See you shortly, Mark.
Okay, thanks.